Hello and welcome to Oakville Matters. Today, we're going to talk about one of the things that perennially always matters to Oakville, and that is how we get along with each other. Joining me today to help us explore this topic are Jim Barry and Margaret Boswell. Jim is the director and executive sponsor for our Planet program, our municipal enforcement services, and Margaret is the manager of strategy and support services for municipal enforcement services. These are the nice folks. Their people are the nice folks who come along when neighbors are having trouble being good neighbors or any other kind of little thing that falls under our nuisance bylaw, our nuisance control bylaws. And Jim, start us off, will you, with what are our nuisance bylaws?
Thank you, Mayor Burton. We have a lot of bylaws that cover nuisance type issues in the town, right from our nuisance bylaw to our lot maintenance bylaw, property standards bylaw, and our noise bylaw. They all deal with those issues that when we're living in an urban society, people tend to have conflicts over in their home or in their neighborhoods. So the province has given us a small bit of authority to help out in those situations. And we try to do that through our bylaws.
All right, and Margaret, obviously we need to look at our bylaws every few years just to make sure that they're keeping up with the times. And with any increase or erosion of power that our leaders downtown at Queen's Park have deigned to change, what's our plan for keeping our bylaws up to date?
Mayor Burton, we are looking at several of our bylaws actually upcoming. Currently, we are undertaking a review of our noise bylaw. We do look at that under the lens of current legislation, whether it be provincial or federal, and also take into consideration any feedback from the public. We are also looking at some further updates to our lot maintenance and property standards bylaws. Those will be upcoming later this year and will be looked at under the lens of how to better support our community, but while also reviewing what is available to us under the powers given to us by our friends at the province.
Well put. So how can people get their ideas and suggestions to you without necessarily diaring a note to look later? In other words, people who watch the show right now, they might say, oh, I want them to do something. And how can they reach us with that? Do you have an email for them to write in with?
Mayor Burton, absolutely. We have a couple of ways you can provide feedback on any of our bylaws. You can certainly call into Service Oakville at any time, and their number, of course, is 905-845-6601. The customer service representatives would be happy to take any comments and provide them to our staff then. If it is something that's warranted with follow-up, we can certainly have staff follow up to provide some more context or clarity to some of the concerns and or take further notes. Residents also have the opportunity to request at that time that they be added to our stakeholder list. And at that time, when we do move forward to council with our proposed bylaws and regulations, what we do is we reach out to those on the stakeholder list, provide them with the date of the council meeting, a link to the agenda, and of course, those stakeholders then would have the opportunity to come forward as delegates if they so wish to do so. So there's lots of opportunity for people to submit their comments and be involved.
What I'm hearing sounds like you're, I'll say, continuous improvement is an everyday attitude in your shop, and you'll follow people down. You'll follow people on into the future to make sure they get a chance. Now let's do a quick review of what our standards are in these nuisance bylaws. I sometimes hear from residents who wish they were stricter. So why don't we set out what the baseline is? Where are we now? And maybe then we'll talk about how much room do we have to wiggle on any of these things? Jim, do you want to lead off?
Sure, Mr. Mayor, I will, I'll start out with a couple of them. We have one of our main nuisance type of bylaws is our noise bylaw. And in the early 2000s, we jumped ahead of a lot of municipalities and created a comprehensive nuisance bylaw, our noise bylaw, which actually deals with noise in two different ways, both in the old qualitative method and in a quantitative method. So using noise readers and technical measurements to actually understand noise. And through that, we set levels that correspond to the province's municipal noise levels, and we go out and measure against them. So generally it's 50 during the day, 45 at night, and we will go and measure noise from properties that exceed those measurements. And that's really the foundation that's allowed us to be part of the Halton Regional Police's Project Noisemaker. Because of our noise bylaw and the technical capacity we have through that, we've been able to take measurements of motorcycle noise. So we often work with Halton Regional Police throughout the summer when we know motorcycles are problematic on our streets, and measure the noise that's being created by those motorcycles. Just some quick stats. Over the last few years, we've actually been involved in pulling over, with Halton Regional Police's assistance, 108 motorcycles and laying 28 charges on those motorcycles for exceeding the noise level limits.
So can I assume safely that there's good motorcycles and not so good motorcycles? And is there how do you tell? How do you decide that of the 100 you pulled over that 30 got tickets or whatever they got?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And that goes back to that technical measurement ability. So a noise level limit is set in the noise bylaw, which corresponds to an international standard. And that's really why we're allowed to incorporate that into the noise bylaw. The international standard says it can't exceed, and it's around 92 decibels measured at a certain distance at a certain angle from the motorcycle. And our officers are all well trained in how to do that. They take the measurement after it's stopped by Halton Regional Police. And if the bike exceeds that decibel level, then a charge is laid.
So it looks like, you know, let's look at the numbers. 100 stopped, almost 30 challenged, but looks like about 70 were said, oh, sorry, we're you know, you're okay. So there must be a borderline thing there where, you know, but for a couple of decibels of noise, you might have had a problem there. I am astonished as I go around the community by the variety of loudness that people seem to have figured out how to make their bikes make. But I have also been very gratified at how many actually are okay. So it feels like it's a choice that the owner rider is making. What's your history with the fines and the charges that you've laid? Has it encouraged better behavior? Are we winning?
Well, I think it's a constant battle, but I would agree with your sentiment that it is a fine line, but most motorcycle riders are in compliance and they want to comply. The issue is that the noise that come from a legal bike, as you said, is very close to the violation limit. So they work in that range, and then it's once you get over that number, that 92, 93 decibels, that you start that you move into the non-compliance range. And even though that seems like a very small number, when measuring noise, it's based on a logarithmic average. So the 1, 2, or 3 decibels can mean 100% difference in power created by that bike. So it is substantial, even though it seems very minor.
Well, another perennial suggestion that I've been receiving for years is, can't we ban loud lawn equipment? And I mean, sometimes they're focused on blowers as some kind of affront to nature, and everybody should rake, becomes the gist of the message. But in some cases, I've even, people have told me, oh, we've got to ban, gasoline powered lawnmowers. And I don't know, either you're going to have to either get an electric mower or cut the grass with scissors or something. Where are we on those issues? You already in your noise consultation, you've got to have heard people wanting blowers banned. I know you know about it because I've been flipping some of those emails to you.
Yeah, what I would say is the consultation we've had on the noise bylaw has been amazing. We actually had over 1,500 comments come in. And a lot of them were based on exactly what you're saying, Mr. Mayor, and whether it's leaf blowers or lawnmowers or those types of things. So we certainly want to capture that. If we look at provinces and cities and countries around the world, they are looking at this from a climate change perspective, from an energy perspective. So this is an important topic, and we do have to dig deep into this to figure out what is the best for Oakville, and what, based on where we are now, including we have the climate emergency that's been established by council. We've got all kinds of different looks at how we're going to deal with climate in the future. So I think the noise bylaw is but one part of that, and through this review, we will look at some of the options we have.
So Margaret, are there any really standout cases, stripping away the names to protect the innocent and the guilty? Are there any outstanding noise cases that you recall as, the first one you tell each other when you sit around reminiscing?
Well, I mean, there are a few that stand out. I mean, oftentimes the ones that become the most contentious are the ones that involve pools and pool heaters and equipment. We generally, in those instances, it becomes a bit of very much becomes a more involved case, because it's just trying to identify, what exactly is the stem or the issue of the noise. Is it people having just common day, sort of everyday conversation in their backyard, trying to have a few people and enjoy their backyard, or is it the equipment? So there have been a few cases that have, become more involved, because it can be very much, it was 10 minutes of the day, and then determining when that time is it something that we can measure, or is it something that's permitted? We've had a couple instances where pool heaters have been, just through virtue of the property and the ways that the properties intersect, the pool equipment have been immediately adjacent to each other, back to back on either side of the fence. So as you can imagine, what seems to be to the one neighbor overwhelming noise, in essence, really actually needs to be measured independently from the 2 points to the 2 points where the equipment is sitting. And so it becomes more so than very much the officer taking the noise reading and trying to have that discussion with the complainant as to what exactly is the root stem of the noise and whether or not it is in compliance. On occasion, there are instances where the officer can work with the neighbors to try to come to an agreeable arrangement to try to minimize the noise or reduce the noise, even though the pool equipment may be well within its permitted limits. It's just really to try to help create a good neighborly environment.
So what happens when maybe the complaint about noise is a surface thing for an underlying neighborhood feud between two neighbors who, for other reasons, aren't getting along? What do you guys do then?
That does happen on occasion, and in those instances, we do refer those individuals to mediation. We do work with, and Jim, help my memory at the moment. I can't remember the organization off the top of my head.
Yeah, it's Community Conflict Resolution Services, and they've had different names over the years, but they've really partnered with the town of Oakville for many years on many different issues. Those issues, as you said, Mr. Mayor, issues that may not be a real violation, but are certainly an aggravation in the neighborhood. And the one thing I have seen over many years in municipal enforcement is there is a capacity out there for residents to want to try to solution some of these problems, and mediation is often a great way to do it.
Well, when anything that helps people get over their conflict is probably going to move us all a lot closer to being livable. One of the things about livability is the really bad neighbor where the property has just been let go, often for mental health reasons. And I know in my time as mayor, we've had I'm thankful that I don't need the fingers of more than one hand to count the times that we've had this, but oh my goodness, they go on forever. And our powers seem to be incredibly limited. Can you walk us through the far end of property standards and how it doesn't work, basically? Is, how come it doesn't work?
Well, maybe I can start, and I'll take your question to Margaret from earlier on a case that as an example case, and this was many years ago, and we had one of those situations you're talking about, Mr. Mayor, where the yard was just exceptionally overtaken by waste, and there were a multitude of problems on the property. And at that time I was an officer and involved in issuing an order. And of course, we issue orders based on, first we give time to comply, then we issue orders. Orders can be appealed. They can be appealed to both the town's property standards committee, and from there to Superior Court. And all of that, as you say, takes a long time. And we're always justifying why we're doing things, why we're taking the steps we are, because we do know it's an intrusion onto private property. But we don't take that lightly either. I mean, our officers are trained as much as we can train them. We know they're empathetic, and they go out and they want to build community as much as possible, but they do have to take these steps. And in the case I'm talking about, after what seemed to be about 1.5 years, I believe, if I remember correctly, we were able to go to the property and clean it up. And we actually took 10 tons of waste from that property just to bring it into compliance. So that's one of the, if I'm ever talking about a situation, that's one of the ones I talk about.
Well, now, when I know of another case where it took longer, and in the end, the house got, if I remember correctly, got boarded up, and it took us for, I think in the end, we might have seized the house. We have this, let's talk about this remote power we have that takes forever to inflict, which is this property matter, when it's really gone crazy and they don't even pay their taxes. Talk about why that takes so long.
Well, absolutely. And Mr. Mayor and Margaret, I'll if you want to chime in, please feel free. But when somebody doesn't pay their taxes, I believe it's 3 years before we can start the process to actually seize that home. And that is a financial process, not something that's done through municipal enforcement. But often we play into that process through our orders and our fines that are to properties, and they add up on property taxes, which is one of the reasons why I started out by saying our officers go out and try and work with property owners, because we don't want to go there. But as you've said, Mr. Mayor, there are lots of times where, for whatever reason, people won't comply. They push the envelope, and officers are required to put orders on, and we go to court and get substantial fines. And a lot of that is then put on taxes, which down the road adds to our ability, even though it's down the road, adds to our ability to seize those homes.
And then, as I understand it, for the first few cycles of this, never mind that's taken 3 years to get there, a partial payment can stop the clock, or gain the party a little extra time. And I linger on this because I do hear from the neighbors of such places, and they're, obviously they're fed up with what they're living with, and they just can't understand why we can't act faster. And I guess it boils down, from what you're saying, it sounds like it boils down to, there's a great presumption in the legal system to protect the private property owner from losing their property. And so they get a lot of extensions in time and room to come to their senses, can we say, or come to compliance, I guess.
That's it.
Might want to put. So now, how do people begin this process when they've got the bad neighbor from heck? They call the Service Oakville number and say, please help me?
Margaret, I'll let you take that.
Yeah, I can take that one. Mr. Mayor, we do have a couple ways that you can submit your complaints. Certainly, always, as I mentioned earlier, Service Oakville is more than happy to assist our residents in noting their concerns and then sending the cases over to our officers for enforcement. And that can be done again by calling through to the main line 905-845-6601 or submitting by email at service@oakville.ca. And then also we do have report a problem for certain case types. More predominantly, that would be relevant to lot maintenance and our long grass and weeds, especially. Actually, interesting fun fact on long grass, we do, looking at the stats from last year, our lot maintenance calls alone were over 1,200 cases that we took in last year. For long grass, 816 of those over 1,200 cases. So our group is a very busy group, and our residents are very much diligent about addressing the concerns in the community and letting us know, which is good, because without that, we aren't able to address the concerns.
So it sounds like you're the lawn care police.
A few things.
So just for curiosity, how long can I let my grass get before you're on me? I won't say how long can I let my grass get before my neighbors are on me, but how high does the grass have to get before we're swooping in?
8 inches. So please, anyone listening, don't let your grass grow over 8 inches. At that point, then you may have, a complaint may be lodged about the grass becoming unruly. Having said that, it's also a little bit easier to maintain your grass when it's a bit shorter. So I see some of,
8 inches. I went away on vacation, and when I got back once, I think well, I'm going to say for safety's sake, it was just reaching 8 inches, but it took 3 passes to cut. So there's truth in what you're saying. Have we ever considered raising or lowering it? Has it been a different number ever? Where did 8 inches come from?
Mr. Mayor, that's a good question, and we did review that, and my memory's a little bit foggy on this, but I know the last time when we introduced the lot maintenance bylaw, and we haven't always had that, we parsed out some of these minor issues from the property standards bylaw, so that can really look at the more major issues. But at that time, we did look at the number and settled on 8 inches because we felt that that was something that was really acceptable and met with the needs of the community.
Okay, so over 8 is bad, 8 or less, okay.
It's a fine line.
It's fine. My wife and I are always discussing, should it be 2.5 or 3? And anyway, we won't go into lawn care advice here, but I'm sure that, if you're watching and you want to advise me and take, I'm not going to say which of us wants 2.5 and which wants 3, but if you have free advice for me, I'll be glad to have it at mayor@oakville.ca. Now, what about other parts of lot maintenance? Or what I have in mind is the upkeep of the home, like painting and windows and roof and tiles and chimneys. Do we get involved in that, or are we not allowed to do that?
Mr. Mayor, we definitely do. And those are the pieces that we've kept in the property standards bylaw. So a lot of the actual property structural, and many of them are safety issues we deal with through property standards. And the authority for that comes from the building code. So in a lot of cases, we do get asked why we can't or don't deal with certain things. And I think it's important to note that the authority for us to enact a property standards bylaw, to have property standards committees, all of those things come from the building code, and we are limited by that process. But where we can, we do have sections of the property standards bylaw that create those safer situations and those more, in some cases, aesthetically better situations for the community when it comes to property standards.
So, I led the Halton Police for 10 years, and I learned doing that there's a concept in enforcement of discretion with officers. Like you can encourage and educate, without going all the way to a harsher step like enforcement sometimes. And people are and the police are actually trained to try to move through that spectrum nicely and slowly and sweetly, because conflict just begets more conflict. And our municipal enforcement folks, you've said several times that they're empathic and they're well trained. Do we do the same thing?
Yes, absolutely, we do. I think it's important that they are officers, but they're community officers. And the goal really for our staff is to gain compliance above all else. So yes, we do have to go through some of the enforcement pieces, but if we can deal with the community, if we can create some harmony there, get some agreement and not have to go that far, that's certainly where our officers are going to move every time.
Now, for many years, we were frustrated by basically a lack of court time to follow up on charges. That had to be an incentive to us to get people to make nice and comply without enforcement. But now we have a tool. The province gave cities a tool just a few years back. I think it's called an administrative penalty. Do you want to, in the minute we got left, can you describe how that works and how that, I think, has seemed to help people? It's helped encourage people that maybe complying is a good idea.
It certainly has, Mr. Mayor, and I'll be very quick. It's a penalty system that mirrors the court system, but actually is handled within the town itself. So we have arm's length people and managing the administrative penalty system to make sure that both residents, so that residents can come to the town. They don't have to go to another municipality to actually go to court, but they can come and they can follow their court process through in a reasonable amount of time.
So an administrative penalty, how does it work that you have to pay it or else dispute it? I mean, does it reverse the onus in some way, or onus? Does it reverse who has to prove what? How does it work?
No, in many ways it mirrors the ticket. There's still an onus on us to prove. There's still a requirement to request a hearing or a screening as may be required. But what it does is it creates a shorter process because we're not bound by the same timings of the court.
Well, that makes the operations of the town ever so little, at least a little bit more efficient. That benefits taxpayers. And I think all residents benefit from what you guys are doing, and I thank you for it. Thank you for being with us today, and see you next time on Oakville Matters.